After giving birth, my drunk husband humiliated me in front of my mother-in-law. Look at you. You're an obese fat woman, covered in stretch marks. You look like a cow. I don't even know how I managed to make a child with you, he shouted with a cruel laugh. But the idiot completely broke down when I revealed to him that. In the dimly lit room, Sienna held her newborn child, trying to find peace amidst an overwhelming exhaustion. Her gaze was one of devotion and fear at the same time, as if the tiny creature in her arms was the only pure thing in a life otherwise filled with shadows. Outside the room, the laughter and murmurs of her husband David's family seeped through the walls, whispers that no longer felt strange but deeply wounding. Since the beginning of her relationship with David, Sienna had endured disdain, cold stares, and cutting remarks. At first, she thought it was temporary, that maybe with love and patience he would change. But time had brought no improvement. The domineering presence of David's mother, a woman with a sharp gaze and calculated gestures, had always turned their home into hostile territory, a battleground where Sienna fought in silence, isolated, and increasingly weakened. Sienna? David's rough, irritable voice interrupted her thoughts. He staggered slightly as he entered the room, a strong smell of alcohol accompanying him. His eyes, filled with the familiar disdain, looked at her without a trace of warmth. "What are you doing there? Like you're some kind of saint?" He spat, laughing. His mother, following closely behind, gave him a look of approval, as if this were a scene they both enjoyed silently. "God, look at you," he continued, his tone dripping with contempt. "You look like a fat, exhausted cow. I don't even know how I managed to make a child with you." Sienna felt her chest tighten. David's words struck with such brutality that they nearly knocked the air out of her, as if he had ripped off a layer of her skin and exposed every wound she had tried to heal in silence. Instead of looking at her husband, her eyes focused on the innocent face of her baby, who slept peacefully, unaware of the pain surrounding his mother. "David," she whispered in a faint voice, trying to stop the avalanche of humiliation. But he didn't stop. His laughter grew louder, a dry and cruel sound that echoed through the room and left a deep scar in the air, as if each chuckle shredded her dignity. "What do you think, Mom? Am I right?" Look at her, covered in stretch marks, a complete disaster. David turned to his mother, seeking her approval. David's mother, also inebriated, gave a cold, mocking smile and slowly nodded, looking at Sienna with the same disdain. "Yes, son, you're absolutely right. Poor you, having to put up with such a thing," she replied, casting a venomous glance. Sienna lowered her head, feeling the heat rise to her cheeks, a burning shame consuming her from the inside. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but the lump in her throat choked her, and the weight of humiliation left her powerless. She couldn't understand how someone she had loved and shared her dreams with could treat her with such cruelty. Tears began to pool in her eyes, but she fought to hold them back. She knew that crying in front of them would only give them more power over her suffering. "You know, Sienna?" David continued. "I think it's time we talked seriously. I can't keep pretending this is a real marriage. Look at you, you're pathetic. I'm tired of this charade. I want a divorce." The word divorce dropped into the room like a bomb, explosive and final. For a moment, the air seemed to stop, and Sienna felt the ground tremble beneath her feet. Divorce? After everything she had sacrificed, everything she had endured, he dared to leave her like this, with her child in her arms and her heart shattered? "David," she murmured, trying to find some explanation, some sign of humanity in her husband. But he only looked at her with a mix of disdain and boredom, as if she were an object he wanted to discard. "I don't want to hear excuses, Sienna. I've already made my decision." David's voice was firm, unyielding, and behind him, his mother smiled in satisfaction, as if everything had been planned. The tension in the room was unbearable. The baby in her arms began to stir, perhaps sensing his mother's anguish. Sienna gently rocked him, trying to calm herself, though inside she felt shattered, as if something essential in her had been irrevocably broken. "You have no right," she finally managed to say, her voice trembling and filled with pain. "You have no right to talk to me like this." David looked at her, amused, as if her pain were a spectacle for him. "Oh, really? And who's going to stop me?" He replied mockingly, moving closer to her. "Do you think anyone's going to defend you? Everyone knows how pathetic you are." Sienna felt a fury rising within her, a rage bottled up from years of mistreatment and disdain. She looked at David, and for a moment, she saw in him everything she had endured, all the pain she had accumulated, all the misery of her life with him and his family. But at the same time, she knew she couldn't confront him like this. She pressed her lips together, swallowing the pain as he watched her with superiority, as if her suffering were insignificant. "Get out of my room, David. Get out of my life if that's what you want. But don't ever insult me like this again." "I won't allow it." David raised his eyebrows, surprised at her response. Sienna had never raised her voice like this, never spoken with such determination. But after a few seconds of surprise, his expression turned into a malicious grin. "Oh, I'm so scared," he mocked, and his mother let out a stifled laugh, a laugh that made Sienna feel even more alone. David and his mother left the room, but his words lingered in the air, like an open wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Sienna sat on the bed with her child in her arms and let her tears flow freely. She knew something inside her had changed, that a door had been opened, and that, somehow, this humiliation had ignited a spark within her. She looked at her child, who slept peacefully, oblivious to the world of torment surrounding his mother. She gently stroked his tiny face and, in a whisper, promised that she would do whatever it took to protect him. She knew the battle ahead wouldn't be easy, that facing David and his mother would require a courage she wasn't yet sure she possessed. But in that moment of darkness, as silence enveloped the house and the cold loneliness of the night surrounded her, Sienna felt something new, the first flicker of strength. A strength that, though faint, would forge itself with every slight, every cruel word, until it became a shield, a promise that her life and her son's life would be different. And so, as the shadows of her past loomed over her, Sienna began to prepare for the path she would have to walk. Days later, Sienna's birthday arrived with a mixture of conflicting emotions. On one hand, she longed, like anyone else, for a moment of peace, a respite from the weight she carried on her chest. Silently, she dreamed of a moment where she could feel loved, valued. On the other hand, she feared the occasion would turn into another scene of humiliation and ridicule. The house was decorated coldly without love, a superficial decoration that reflected the emptiness Sienna lived in. The guests, acquaintances, and David's friends began to fill the room. No one seemed to truly be there for her. The conversations revolved around David and his achievements, and his friends appeared to be there more to please him than to celebrate her life. Sienna felt invisible on her own birthday, like a stranger in her own home. David appeared amidst the crowd, laughing loudly, displaying a wide smile that disappeared the moment his eyes fell on Sienna. She tried to approach him, looking for some sign of affection, a minimal gesture to remind her why she had once believed in him. But David ignored her, moving away to chat with his friends, leaving her alone in a corner of the room. When the guests settled down and the murmur ceased, David raised his voice and called for everyone's attention. He walked toward Sienna with an air of superiority, holding something behind his back. People turned to watch, and a tense anticipation filled the air. "Well, dear Sienna," David began, forcing a smile, "today is your birthday, and I thought a lot about what I could give you. Something that truly represents who you are, something useful and practical for you. So here it is." He extended his hand and, with a theatrical gesture, handed Sienna a broom. The guests let out restrained laughs, some exchanging complicit glances. Sienna, pale-faced and with a distant look, stared at the broom in her hands as if it were an unknown and foreign object. The laughter and murmurs grew, and David added with a sarcastic smirk, "It's your vehicle to fly away from my life whenever you want." The phrase echoed in the room like a whip, and the guests' mockery became more evident. David's mother let out a sharp laugh, like a needle piercing the air, and the others, seeing her reaction, joined in the laughter without hesitation, celebrating what they believed was an innocent joke. But for Sienna, that moment marked something different. She felt a wave of humiliation wash over her, a mix of anger, sadness, and deep despair. David's words and the guests' laughter surrounded her, making her feel trapped in a cruel mockery. She gripped the broom tightly, and inside her, a storm began to form, a fury she had never felt with such intensity. Without taking her eyes off David, who watched her with a mocking smile, Sienna walked to the table where the birthday cake rested. She raised the broom into the air and, without warning, brought it down onto the cake, smashing it in front of everyone. The room fell silent, and the laughter stopped. The guests stared at her, surprised, unsure of how to react to her gesture. David took a step toward her, his face hardening and his lips pressed into an expression of disapproval. "What the hell are you doing, Sienna?" he said in a low voice, trying to contain the anger beginning to show in his eyes. She didn't respond. Her breathing was uneven, and her gaze, fixed on the destroyed cake, showed a fire that no one there had ever seen before. She lifted her eyes to David, and her tear-filled eyes, filled with indignation and pain, seemed to challenge him in a way he didn't understand. "I'm tired," Sienna said, her voice trembling but firm. "Tired of your mockery, your humiliations, of everyone here thinking it's funny to treat me like garbage. This is my life, David, and you have no right to destroy it any more than you already have." David frowned and crossed his arms, uncomfortable with the attention now directed at him. Beside him, his mother intervened, wearing a look of reproach and disapproval. "Sienna, dear, there's no need to be so dramatic," she said with a superior tone. "We're all here to have a good time. Don't ruin the party with your childish behavior." Sienna let out a bitter laugh and looked at David's mother, feeling, for the first time, that the words flowed without fear. "Childish behavior," she repeated, incredulously. "I've endured years of your scorn, your mockery, and your venomous comments. I tried to be the perfect wife, the woman you wanted, and still, nothing is enough. I'm not going to be that person for you anymore. Today, here and now, I decide you will no longer use my life as your entertainment." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. No one dared to move, the faces of the guests reflecting a mix of surprise and confusion. David, visibly irritated, tried to approach her, but Sienna stepped back, raising her hand to stop him. "Don't come any closer," she said firmly, looking around. "This is over. I refuse to keep enduring your abuse, your contempt. I'm no longer the person you thought you could crush. No more." David's mother stepped forward, her expression filled with restrained fury. "You have no right to speak like this," she said with a tone full of disdain. "You've been a burden to my son since day one. We gave you everything, allowed you into this family. You should be grateful and not act like an ungrateful child." "Grateful?" Sienna repeated, looking directly at her mother-in-law, feeling her pain transform into words she could no longer contain or want to. "I have been grateful, yes, grateful that you showed me what I never want to be. Grateful for seeing what selfishness and cruelty can do to a family. Thanks to you, I know I deserve better." David, seeing his friends murmuring uncomfortably, felt cornered and took a step toward Sienna, trying to regain control of the situation. "I'm warning you, Sienna. This pathetic performance won't make anyone believe you. Everyone knows you're a weak and dependent woman, someone who has no worth on her own." David's words became the last drop that spilled the glass. Sienna felt that every insult, every cruel comment, every gesture of scorn over the years came to life in her, transforming into an irrevocable decision. "You're right, David," she said with a serenity she had never felt before. "I never had worth because you and your mother made sure to destroy me. But not anymore. This is the last time you humiliate me, the last time you make me feel like I'm less. I'm leaving. Don't worry, I'll let you be the center of attention, the one who needs all these spectators to feel strong." With that, Sienna turned and, broom in hand, walked toward the door. The guests watched her in silence, not daring to say a word, as she left the house that, for so long, had been her prison. David's mother tried to stop her, but Sienna ignored her, feeling with every step that she was leaving behind a part of herself she no longer needed. She realized that, for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She had made the decision to fight for herself, to live a life no one else could destroy. As she left the house and the darkness of the night enveloped her, Sienna felt a strange mix of freedom and emptiness. She knew the road ahead would be difficult and full of obstacles, but she also knew that, no matter what, she wouldn't return to that place of humiliation and abuse. Closing the door behind her, Sienna left behind not just the house, but a life of oppression, a story of scorn and pain. When Sienna closed the door behind her, she felt the night's chill seep into her bones. Her breath was rapid and uneven, as if every step away from the house reminded her that she had left behind not just a life, but a part of herself. Holding her son in her arms, her only bond of love and hope, she began to walk aimlessly, driven by the need to distance herself from that place which had only brought her humiliation and suffering. The baby, barely aware of the tumult around him, slept in her arms, his tranquil breathing contrasting with the chaos in Sienna's heart. She walked for what seemed an eternity, her thoughts echoing in her head like the reverberations of what she had endured: David's scorn, her mother's coldness, the laughter of guests at her own birthday. Each step she took felt like an affirmation of her decision, a reminder that there was no turning back. Looking around, she realized she was alone on a deserted street. With the cold and fatigue finally taking their toll, she sat down on a nearby bench, and the tears she had held back for so long began to slide down her face. There, in the solitude of the night, and with her son as her only comfort, she knew she needed help, someone to trust, someone who could offer her the support and security she so desperately craved. With trembling hands, she took out her phone and searched for the number of Yennefer, her best friend since childhood. Yennefer was someone she had always trusted, a person who had never let her down and whom she had kept at a distance due to David's influence. The phone rang several times, and for a moment, Sienna feared she wouldn't answer. But then, Yennefer's familiar voice came on the other end of the line, filled with surprise and concern. "Sienna?" Yennefer asked, immediately sensing the urgency in the call. "What's happening? Are you okay?" Sienna swallowed the lump in her throat and tried to reply, though her voice was barely a whisper. "No, Yennefer, I can't take it anymore. I left the house. I walked out of that place and I don't know where to go." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, and then Yennefer's voice became more firm and protective. "Listen, Sienna, come to my house. I'll help you. You'll be safe here. No matter what time it is, you and the baby have a place here with me." Yennefer's words were a balm to Sienna, who, for the first time in a long while, felt a bit of relief. She stood up from the bench, adjusted her son in her arms, and with newfound determination, began to walk toward the only refuge where she knew she would find peace and understanding. Upon arriving at Yennefer's house, the door opened before she could ring the bell. Yennefer greeted her with open arms, and Sienna, with her baby in her arms, collapsed into an embrace full of tenderness and empathy. Yennefer guided her inside, without saying a word, allowing her a moment of calm before asking. "Come in, sit down," Yennefer said, her tone both soft and firm at the same time. "You don't have to tell me anything now if you don't want to. The only thing that matters is that you're here, that you're safe." Sienna collapsed onto the couch, still holding her son, who continued to sleep, oblivious to the chaos surrounding his mother. Yennefer sat beside her and quietly handed her a glass of water. Sienna took a sip, feeling her breathing slowly calm down. "I left, Yennefer," she finally said, breaking the silence. "I couldn't stand a minute longer in that house. David, he humiliated me, in front of everyone, again." Yennefer listened attentively, and her eyes showed a mix of understanding and anger. She knew Sienna had endured much, that she had been silent for years. But seeing her there, broken and on the verge of tears, she knew this time was different. "You don't have to go back to that place ever again," Yennefer said firmly. "Here, you can start anew. David doesn't deserve you, and certainly not your son. He needs a strong mother, and that's what you are, Sienna. What you just did is brave, even if you don't feel it right now." The baby began to stir in her arms, and Sienna looked at him, her heart tightening. Yennefer also looked at the little one and, with a warm smile, stroked his head. "He deserves to live in a place where there is no hate or scorn," Yennefer said softly. "He deserves a happy childhood, with a mother who loves him and is at peace." Sienna nodded, feeling determination fill her heart again. She stayed silent, watching her son, and for the first time felt that the decision to leave was the first step toward a life worthy of him. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, that David wouldn't let her go easily. But now, with Yennefer by her side, she felt stronger. In the following days, Yennefer helped her settle into her home. She offered her a warm and cozy room for her and the baby, a space where both could feel safe. Yennefer became her pillar, supporting her every step and making sure Sienna knew she was not alone. One morning, while Sienna was arranging the few belongings she had brought, Yennefer appeared in the doorway of the room with a friendly smile. "There's someone I want you to meet," she said. "He's a good friend of mine, and I think he can help with some repairs around the house, including your room. Plus, I think it'll be good for you to talk to someone kind." A few minutes later, a tall man with a serene look entered the house, holding a toolbox and with a peaceful expression on his face. Yennefer introduced him with a smile. "Sienna, this is Ivan. He's an excellent painter and a reliable friend. Don't worry, he's here to help, nothing more." Ivan extended his hand and greeted Sienna with a kind gesture. Looking at him, she felt a mix of distrust and curiosity. She was still not used to kindness without an ulterior motive, and though Yennefer trusted him, Sienna couldn't help feeling uncomfortable. In the days that followed, Ivan started working on the room, fixing the small flaws and painting the walls the colors Sienna had chosen. He always maintained a respectful attitude and made sure not to invade her space. Sometimes, Sienna watched him from the doorway, surprised by his dedication and the tranquility he radiated. Little by little, they began to exchange words, and without realizing it, their conversations grew deeper. One afternoon, as Yvonne was finishing painting a wall, Sienna sat near him, holding her son in her arms. On impulse, she began to speak, letting out words she had kept inside for so long. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing," she said softly. "I left David's house, and now I wonder if my son deserved something better. He deserved a united family, but Yvonne turned to her with a calm and understanding look. "Your son deserves peace, Sienna," he replied. "He deserves to grow up in a place where his mother is happy, where he can learn to love without fear. You haven't taken anything from him. You've given him a life free from pain." Sienna looked at him, surprised by the clarity of his words. No one had ever spoken to her that way before. At that moment, she felt something inside her begin to heal, as if Yvonne's words were a balm for the wounds in her soul. As the days went by, Sienna began to feel that her life was changing. Conversations with Yvonne and Yennefer's constant support filled her with hope. She felt that, for the first time in a long while, she had the chance to build a different life, to give her son a home full of love and safety. One evening, while she was preparing dinner with Yennefer, Sienna heard her phone vibrate. She picked it up, and when she saw David's name on the screen, fear took hold of her again. She opened the message, and as she read it, her face turned pale. David was demanding to see his son, and his words hinted at threats and accusations. He said that if she didn't return, he would find a way to take the boy from her, that he would fight in court for custody. Sienna sat down, feeling the weight of the threats. Yennefer noticed the change in her expression and immediately came closer. "What's wrong, Sienna?" she asked with concern. Sienna showed her the message, and Yennefer read it silently. When she finished, she looked up with a mix of fury and determination. "He can't do this to you, Sienna. He has no right to manipulate you, and we're not going to let him intimidate you. You have a new life, and we'll fight to make sure no one takes that away from you." That night, surrounded by Yennefer's support and the calm Yvonne brought her, Sienna realized she was no longer alone in her fight. For the first time, she felt she had the power to defend herself and protect her son from the past she had left behind. The trial was scheduled for the following Tuesday, and Sienna felt each minute ticking closer like a countdown to an inevitable showdown. David had filed for custody of their son, alleging in his documents that Sienna was an unstable and manipulative mother. The words she had read in the papers echoed in her mind like a cruel echo, filling her with rage and uncertainty. Each night, as she held her son in her arms and watched him sleep, her determination grew. She could not let David get his way, not when he was only using the child as a tool for control and revenge. The thought of him taking her baby away terrified her, but it also propelled her to fight. The night before the trial, Sienna was sitting on the couch at Yennefer's house, reviewing the documents with the help of her lawyer, Esteban. Yennefer had stayed by her side to support her, and her son slept in the adjoining room. The tension in the air was palpable, and Esteban, a man with a calculating gaze and a calm voice, spoke to Sienna firmly. "Tomorrow is your chance to prove that you are a capable and loving mother," he said, looking her directly in the eyes. "David is going to try to discredit you, to make the judge doubt you. But I want you to know that we are prepared. All you have to do is speak the truth from the heart. No one can question what you've done for your son." Sienna nodded, though doubt consumed her inside. She was not afraid to face David, but she feared her words might not be enough, that the system might fail her, leaving her at the mercy of the man who had humiliated and scorned her for years. Yennefer noticed her discomfort and, placing a hand on her shoulder, gave her an encouraging squeeze. "You are stronger than you think, Sienna," she said softly. "Everything you've been through has prepared you for this moment. Tomorrow, no one can ignore the truth." The next day, at the courthouse, Sienna entered with a racing heart and a firm expression on her face. She carried her son in her arms and handed him to Yennefer, who had promised to look after him while the trial was underway. The courtroom was abuzz with whispers, and when David entered with his lawyer, he gave her a cold, disdainful look. David appeared confident, with an arrogant smile that seemed to mock the solemnity of the setting. Sienna felt her blood boil, but she forced herself to remain calm, knowing that any slip-up could cost her dearly. The judge, an older man with a stern expression, began to speak, and the trial commenced. The first part focused on Sienna's story, her role as a mother, and the years of emotional abuse she had endured alongside David. Esteban was meticulous in his questioning, allowing Sienna to tell her truth, to describe in detail the humiliations, scorn, and threats David had hurled at her over the years. With each word she spoke, the accumulated pain and anger came to light, and though her voice trembled, her resolve was unbreakable. "He never wanted to be part of our son's life," Sienna said, looking directly at the judge. "He always told me I was worthless, that I was a burden. My only mistake was staying too long, believing he could change. But I don't want my son to grow up in an environment of hate and manipulation. I won't allow that to happen." The judge listened attentively, nodding occasionally, while Esteban continued to guide her through her memories. When it was David's turn, his lawyer began to question every aspect of her life, trying to portray her as unstable and incapable. David stood up, his piercing gaze fixed on her. "Sienna has always been a difficult woman," David began, his voice calm. "She was never able to handle pressure, always weak. Even after having our son, she would spend her days complaining, doing nothing. Honestly, I don't think she can be a good mother. And I want to give my son a chance to have a real family." David's words fell heavily in the room, and Sienna felt a mix of indignation and horror take hold of her. She couldn't believe he had the audacity to present himself as a concerned father when he had barely shown interest in the child. She clenched her lips and looked to Esteban, who nodded calmly at her, signaling not to fall for the provocation. Esteban stood up and began to cross-examine David, steering the conversation towards his numerous absences in the child's life and his lack of commitment as a father. He inquired about the times David had been at Sienna's house just to humiliate her, his hurtful comments, and his consistent disinterest in his son's well-being. As the questioning progressed, David's arrogance crumbled, and his relaxed posture gave way to evident irritation. The climax came when Esteban brought to light something few knew about. David had been previously accused of abuse by a former partner, a detail that had been hidden for years. The revelation dropped like a bomb in the courtroom, and David's face contorted into an expression of fury and surprise. "Is it true, Mr. David, that you have been previously accused of emotional and psychological abuse?" Esteban asked firmly, keeping his gaze fixed on him. David tried to dodge the question, but the judge forced him to answer. His lawyer attempted to intervene, arguing that the past was irrelevant to the current situation, but the judge allowed the question to proceed, making it clear that he wanted to know the full truth before making a decision. "David, now visibly upset, finally admitted to the accusation, though he tried to downplay its significance. "That was a long time ago," he said tensely. "It has nothing to do with my ability to care for my son now." Esteban, however, didn't stop there. He continued pressing, making it clear that David had a pattern of abuse, manipulation, and control over those who shared his life. The room fell silent, and Sienna felt a new hope rise within her. Finally, the judge called for a recess, and Sienna stepped out into the hallway with Esteban and Yennefer, who was holding her son in her arms. Yennefer approached her and offered a hug as Sienna collapsed into her arms, releasing the tears she had held back throughout the trial. "You're closer to achieving this, Sienna," Yennefer whispered to her. "The judge is seeing the truth, seeing what you and your son have endured." When they returned to the courtroom, the judge spoke. His voice was stern and full of authority, and everyone in the room fell silent, waiting for the verdict. After hearing both testimonies and analyzing the evidence presented, he began, "I have reached a decision. It is clear that the situation between the parents of this child is marked by severe and prolonged conflicts, in which the mother has endured abusive and demeaning treatment from the father." David attempted to intervene, but the judge raised a hand, signaling for him to remain silent. "The child's well-being is my priority," the judge continued. "And I cannot overlook the pattern of behavior I have observed in Mr. David. Therefore, full custody is awarded to the mother. The father's visits will be subject to supervision until further notice." The decision was clear, and Sienna felt a wave of relief wash over her. The judge's words confirmed that her son would be safe, that the nightmare she feared would not come to pass. David, on the other hand, reacted with barely contained fury, and before leaving the courtroom, he approached Sienna and delivered one final threat. "This isn't over, Sienna," he said in a low, hateful voice. "You'll regret taking my son away from me. You don't know what I'm capable of." Sienna looked him in the eye, feeling fear try to creep back into her heart, but this time she refused to let it take hold. "I know what I'm capable of too, David," she replied firmly. "And I assure you, I will do whatever it takes to protect my son from you." Months had passed since that day in court, and even though Sienna had won custody of her son, David didn't give up easily. The threats continued, each one more subtle and calculated than the last. David tried to make her believe he still had some power over her, sending cryptic messages, showing up unannounced near Yennefer's house, or spreading rumors in the neighborhood about her supposed instability as a mother. Sienna, however, stood firm, remembering the judge's words and the support of Esteban, her lawyer, who backed her at every step. During this time, Sienna focused on rebuilding her life. With Yennefer's constant support and the kind presence of Yvonne, who had become an unwavering friend, she found a new strength within herself. She began studying law with the intention of helping others who, like her, had been victims of abuse. Her days were filled with study and work, and her nights were dedicated to her son, who was her reason for being and her greatest inspiration to keep moving forward. Months later, one afternoon, as Sienna and her son walked through the park, she felt someone's gaze fixed on her. She turned and, to her surprise, there was David, standing and watching her from a safe distance. He no longer wore the elegant suit or carried the arrogant attitude he once had. Now, he looked disheveled, tired, and worn. When he noticed that Sienna had seen him, he forced a bitter smile and began walking toward her. "Sienna," he said in a strained voice, trying to convey a calm he clearly didn't feel. "I need to talk to you. I just want you to listen." Sienna tensed and immediately held her son more tightly. She looked around for an escape, but realizing they were in an open space filled with people, she decided to stay. She knew running would only give David more reason to persist. "Say what you have to say and then leave," she responded, keeping her voice firm. David stepped a little closer, and there was something different in his gaze, a mix of nostalgia and defeat. "I've lost everything, Sienna," he said softly. "The business I had fell apart, my mother doesn't speak to me anymore, and everything has changed since you left. I didn't think things would end up this way." Sienna watched him silently, remembering all the times he had humiliated and belittled her. For years, she had dreamed of hearing him admit he was wrong, that he regretted all the harm he had done. But now, seeing him in this state, she realized his words no longer held any meaning for her. David was just a broken man, trapped in his own mistakes, and that vision brought her no satisfaction. It was merely proof of what hatred and arrogance could do to a person. "And what do you expect me to do with that, David?" She replied calmly. "Do you think a simple, 'I'm sorry,' is going to erase years of abuse? I don't want revenge. I don't want to see you suffer. I just want you to stay away from me and my son. That's all I ask." David looked at her, surprised by the coldness in her tone, as if he still expected her to hold some grudge. He ran a hand through his hair, and his expression shifted from defeat to pleading. "Sienna, please, give me a chance. I can change. I want to be part of our son's life. I want to know him, to be a good father." Sienna felt anger surge within her. For months, he had tried to manipulate her, intimidate her, and now, at his lowest point, he was trying to re-enter her life by playing the remorseful father card. "David, you don't want to be a good father," she said firmly. "You just want to regain control over me. My son has the right to grow up without fear, in an environment where love and respect are real. I won't let you or your problems back into our lives." David clenched his fists, and for a moment, Sienna feared he might lose control. But instead, his shoulders slumped, and his face reflected deep bitterness. He had lost, and for the first time in his life, he knew it. "You have no idea what you're doing, Sienna," he muttered, his voice full of resentment. "You're destroying the only family our son could have." Sienna met his gaze, feeling a calm she would have once thought impossible for herself. "The only family my son needs is one that loves and respects him. That's what I have now, and you're no longer a part of it." Without waiting for a response, she turned and began to walk away, leaving David standing, alone and defeated, in the middle of the park. As she walked, she felt an immense weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free, no chains, no fear, just the peace of knowing she had closed that chapter for good. That encounter marked the definitive end of her relationship with David. Sienna knew he might try to bother her again, but this time, she was prepared. She had the support of Yennefer, Yvonne, and everyone who had stood by her through her healing process. As the days passed, she began to notice a profound change in her life. Her confidence grew, her self-love strengthened, and the future she had dreamed of for herself and her son became increasingly real. Yvonne, who had been a friend and an unwavering support, became something more. Over time, their relationship blossomed, built on the respect and kindness he had shown her from the very beginning. To Sienna, he represented everything David never was: patience, tenderness, and understanding. Years later, Sienna and Yvonne married in an intimate ceremony, surrounded by close friends and loved ones. Her son, who had grown up in a home filled with love and stability, was the one who brought them their wedding rings. As she looked at him, Sienna felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing that all her pain and struggles had led her to that moment. Not long after, Sienna fulfilled another dream. She graduated as a lawyer and began working for an organization that defended the rights of women and children in abusive situations. Each case she took on was an opportunity to help those who, like her, had lived in silence and fear. Her own story became a testament to resilience and hope for those seeking a way out, a second chance. One afternoon, while walking with her son and Yvonne after a day's work, she passed by a restaurant and saw a familiar figure. It was David, who now worked as a waiter at the place. He glanced at her but didn't dare approach. Sienna noticed his eyes fill with surprise and something that looked like regret, but she kept her distance. Yvonne, noticing David's presence, gave her hand a gentle squeeze, a gesture of support and understanding. "Are you okay?" Yvonne asked quietly, watching her with concern. Sienna nodded, not taking her eyes off David, who looked at her with a mix of nostalgia and defeat. "Yes, I'm fine," she replied with a calm smile. "He no longer has any power over me. I'm free now, and my life is everything I ever dreamed of." With those words, Sienna took one final step into her new life, leaving the shadow of her past behind forever. She knew the peace she had found was a treasure earned through effort and pain, and now, as she looked at her son and her husband, she understood she had built the family she had always deserved. If you enjoyed this story, I invite you to leave a comment sharing how it made you feel, and if you've experienced a similar betrayal, I'd love to hear your valuable opinion. I'd be truly honored if you gave it a like, shared the video with a friend or family member, and subscribed to the channel. Don't miss the next amazing story that's appearing on your screen right now. We have exclusive entertainment guaranteed just for you. See you in the next video.